Welcome to another episode of the Bleeding Edge of Digital Health. Really excited for today's guest. We've got Jae Bang, founder and CEO of Future Cardia. Jae, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
Having me.
So we've known each other for, gosh, I don't know what it's been, maybe 10, 15 years, and
I think so,
we've
yeah.
watched you kind of progress through your career, and now you've moved on to be a founder of this company, which is really exciting. Excited to talk about the technology and also just kind of the your evolution as a founder and how this whole thing came about. But we can get into the tech in a minute, but in short, I think I would summarize it as a miniature subcutaneous insertable cardiac monitor for the chronic management of heart failure patients. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. We're using uh, ECG and heart sounds as the biomarker to assess cardiac
Yeah.
patients. So we're going to do a trending analysis of a chronic condition using ECG and heart
Yeah, and it
sounds.
couldn't have picked a bigger market and probably a more underserved market, in my opinion, at least here in the U.S. And I think it's probably applicable across the rest of the world as well. Why don't people always love to see how how the sausage was made? What's the origin story here? Can you tell us just kind of how this whole thing came about? A little bit about your story and what made you decide to start Future Cardia.
Sure. So I started in the clinical sales at Medtronic, pacemakers and defibrillators. Loved it. It was one of the best thing I've done. And after that, I went on to two startup companies, CBRX and EBR Systems. Both were implantable cardiac devices slash neuromodulations. And also in between, I worked at Abiomed. So, past 20 years or so, I've been focusing on implantable devices, especially for arrhythmias and heart failure. So when it comes to that space, I feel really comfortable. But in terms of therapy, patients are doing pretty well. We got really great devices out there. But when it comes to monitoring, not so much. Patients go through this very traumatic surgeries in the hospital and they're pretty much sent home with nothing. Call us if something goes wrong. So I wanted to come up with a solution for them when they are most vulnerable, which is outside of the hospital.
Right.
So I was in Europe for 2 years working for a great company, EBR Systems, and I felt the same way. So I wanted to bring it to the market and bring value to patients and clinicians as well as the
And
investors.
what did EBR do? What was that?
Oh, EBR is EBR Systems. It's a wireless pacing of the left ventricle.
Got it.
So it's using ultrasound. So it's I call it a NASA technology.
Right.
It's a crazy high tech, incredibly effective device. But at the same time, it's a therapy. It's like all therapies are pretty good. I would be happy with any of the therapies that's out there right now if this was my family member. So in that aspect, we're serving our patient population and physicians very well.
What was it? Was there a moment where you were like, there's got to be a better way. I'm going to do this. Was there something that kind of drove you to, take that from like, yeah, this is an underserved component of the community to, yeah, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I remember in the emergency room seeing a patient. As a device guy, when a patient goes to the ER, I'm there to support our technology. And I'm seeing the patient, and everything that he's experiencing, I'm seeing it on our data sheet. The device is telling us exactly what the patient's going through. And I'm keep telling the patient, yeah, I'm seeing what you're seeing. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't help me in the ER. I'm already in the ER. I mean, how is it going to help me at home when I'm suffering this problem? And that's when I'm like, oh, you're right. For the 20 years, we're just focusing on treating these patients. And the patient goes, yeah, great. Yeah, everybody knows it except me and my
Right.
doctor. And when I'm at home. So that's when I realized we need some kind of a monitoring solution for them. And there is one already. But these are, again, very invasive, requires a cardiac cath lab procedure. So a lot of the physicians are not using it because even though it's accurate, because it's complex, expensive. So and all wearables are ideal too for a short term. So there's like this huge gap in the middle that the patients are really in need of. long-term monitoring without being too invasive.
Yeah, yeah, and that was actually my next question was what what's the use case it's always interesting to know the specific use case that you're trying to solve. You just kind of alluded to it, but yeah, it's like that gap, right? There's a therapeutic side of, okay, the patient's in heart failure and they're either in the ER and get moved up to the OR for a procedure or whatnot, and then there's the short-term monitoring that the
Right.
wearable type device. But what's the market, that is, that the market you're going after, is that kind of that gap in between the two, and how big is that market? What How do you assess that?
Sure. So wearables are ideal for short term, and that's the first line of defense. So if you have any type of arrhythmia problem, that is the first thing that you should do. And I would encourage you to do it twice if you can. But if that fails, the patient's only other option is an implantable, subcutaneously implantable device to monitor their arrhythmia for a long duration. So that's the only two options. First, do the wearables, and if that doesn't work, then do the insertable cardiac
And
monitor. But
where's
for
that patient, on the wearable side? Where does that get administered? Does that get administered when they're in the ER, or is that in the follow up visit with their cardiologist, where the cardiologist says, "Hey, we're going to give you a wearable to take home, so we can get some data"?
right,
Where do they get that? Where does that intervention come? And then also, on the other side of it, once they've had the wearable, tell us a little bit about what that looks like now, with them having to go through a procedure in the cath lab. It's much more invasive than your solution, which I think is really,
sure.
really slick and really unique. But I want people to understand kind of, here's kind of the low end of the intervention. Here's the extensive intervention that would be required, and then I think that's important for people to understand how unique your device is.
Sure, sure. So there's two diseases that we're tackling. The first, arrhythmia monitoring. So arrhythmia monitoring, you have some kind of event, and then you go to the doctors, and that's when they will put the a patch or some type of wearable on you. And if you are unfortunate to end up in the emergency room, you're probably going to be admitted, and that's when they will, at the hospital, they'll put the patches on you, and something in that nature. And for long term, traditional insertable cardiac monitors like Medtronic Link and Abbott Confirm RX. So those are already in existence. And those are the only two options for the patients. And after that, they go into the therapy mode. But for heart failure, right now the option is wearables that are not really effective for long term, because these are chronic patients. So having a wearable for a month or 2 months is not going to serve this patient beyond that. So the alternative is to do a sensor implant inside the heart in a cath lab. So those are two options that the patients have right now.
Mm.
Short term, which is not all that helpful, or a cardiac cath lab procedure, which is very accurate but complex and expensive and suffer from low adoption. So companies like us, Future Cardia, Medtronic, and Boston Scientific are saying, well, we got these two problems, not so helpful and too invasive. So there has to be something in the middle ground. And wearables doesn't serve the patient population for more than several weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we need something permanent. And the only viable option right now is inserted under the skin in a 2 minute office procedure, something that's it's a common procedure right now, and it introduces a special sensor that will record ECG, heart sounds, and other cardiac performance indicators. So right now, there's just three of us: Medtronic, Boston, and Future Cardia.
Those three companies are in development with a technology like what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, the insertable cardiac monitor specifically for heart failure.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a copy, or do you have a device that you could show?
Sure. So this is the actual device. So we tested it in the animal labs, including at Duke University, and then we are few weeks away from human implant.
Wow. Okay. So you're moving right along. How big is that? What's the dimensions on it?
Sure. So it's smaller than the old loop recorder,
Yep.
but bigger than the current one. So what we did is we optimized the size. We maximized the size for performance, better connectivity, better ECG, everything. While we're by doing that, we there's no compromise to patient comfort and no compromise to implant time. So we are bigger than the predicate devices currently in the market devices, but we'll bring a better performance without any compromise to the patients and physicians.
And the video that you guys have on the website, the video of insertion is really slick. The device or the tool that you guys use to insert the technology is incredible. Is this something that would be inserted in the office, or would it be inserted? And would they have to go to like a outpatient center, cath lab, something like that, or could they do it in the office?
Yeah, so these are designed for the office procedure. So there are physicians that are doing it in the office and also in the outpatient settings. This is not for uh, in or in the hospital because there's no need to do that. And the insertion itself is not unique to us. So the insertable cardiac monitor's been around for this version's been around for maybe 5 years. So still at the infancy.
Mm-hmm.
So all the companies that are already out there are doing it in a similar fashion. Small numb up the local area, make a small incision, and using a special insertion tool, slide it in, and either make a one little stitch or cover with
Band-aid or
a special
something.
band.
Yeah,
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 yeah. And that's actually a huge advantage for us. So we're not creating anything brand new. We're just modifying it and improving it. So the physicians know how to implant these products already, and the nurses know how to follow up on these patients and monitor these patients.
yeah.
So we're we're definitely not recreating the wheel, reinventing the wheel. We're a fast follower and improving what's already out there.
What's the key differentiators of what's out there right now?
Sure. So by maximizing the size, we improve the antenna performance. So imagine something a lot smaller under the skin trying to communicate with your phone. And that seems to be the biggest complaint from physician users saying, hey, I just implanted this high tech device and it's not connecting.
Mm-hmm.
So what good is it?
Right.
And when it does connect, because it's of the size, they're not getting a clear ECG. So there's two barriers. So not connecting well, and when you do connect, you're getting a poor image. So the whole purpose of getting device is to get a clear understanding of what the patient's going through. Now they're being introduced to another variable, so they're not sure what's going on. It makes it even more complicated and frustrating for them. So certainly we could have made it smaller, but I think they would have sacrificed the performance of the device. So we maximize that side while admitting that we're going to lose the size battle.
Right. Yeah, but it's if you're, what's the use in having a device implanted in you if you're not going to get the data that you need, right?
Right, right. And also because of the size, we are able to grow into it. We can put more sensors that we're working on right now that the other guys just cannot do. Physically, there's no space to put anything else on other than ECG and other. I think they have a heart sound feature as well, but that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So with ours, we were able to grow and make it more powerful. So it's almost like a kind of like a smartphone situation. Everybody wanted to make it smaller and smaller, and at that point, it's completely useless. Now it's getting bigger and
Right.
bigger.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's a great point, actually. Really good point. Where is it at regulatory wise? I know you said you're going to do first in man. What does that pathway look like moving forward?
sure, sure. Yeah, so we did a quite extensive investigative report for the FDA and provided to them saying the predicate device did not have to do a human trial, and they agreed. And FDA just wrote us saying that we do not need to do human trial, which is a huge thing for us. And again, we're not delivering any therapies, we're monitoring it. Although it's very complicated technology, there's no compromise to patients. So we're able to do we're able to submit to the FDA without human trial. Having said that, we're still going to do a few human implants, and I think we can bring value to patients and physicians that way. We can get the data and also monitor them on the arrhythmia side as well. So we're going to do that in a few weeks.
So you'll start that, and then when will the submission be? When do you expect to hear back from the FDA?
Yeah, so this is a 510(k).
Ah,
So that's a
yeah,
huge
yeah,
first,
yeah.
right? This is one of the very few, if only, 510K device that is implantable cardiac monitor. So we have the technology of similar to pacemakers and defibrillators while having the advantage of 510K. So we're going to submit to the FDA probably end of Q1 next year, like March timeframe. And because it's 510K, it should take about 6 months for a FDA clearance. So we're 1 year away from commercialization.
That's incredible. And the magic question that I'm sure you get asked from investors all the time, reimbursement wise, where does that sit?
Yeah, and actually that's another thing that I thought about when I started this company. Working for two startups, massively funded, incredibly talented people, 10 years, 15 years in that world, still not approved. So I wanted something that has a short regulatory process, but with the existing reimbursement. So the predicates have a reimbursement. So we will follow that path. It's a $7,600. Yeah, so I think as an industry, it's about $1 billion a year business. And we're going to tap into that not only from a device perspective but from a data perspective.
And when you talk about data, so how does that get managed on the back end? Is there like a portal that the physician logs into? Obviously, I'm sure it's probably pretty limited what the patients can see, right? Because you don't want them to. Yeah,
Word.
yeah, right. If they're
Yeah.
looking at it every day, then they're showing up at the
Yeah.
ER or whatnot. I'm sure
Right.
that that's probably not advantageous. But what will you guys manage the data and within that portal, and then the physician just accesses it? They get a report every morning of here's the patients that are red, yellow, green, or
Yep. Exactly like that. Exactly like that. And these are chronic patients, so we're not looking for emergencies.
right.
We want to prevent or we want to monitor and steer patients away from emergency events. So let's say some event happened to the patient today, right now, and this will be sitting in the cloud overnight. The nurse will see that tomorrow morning, and then or Monday morning, and the physician will act on that. So we have about 2 week time period to make a decision for that patient. And in terms of the accessing the data, from a patient's perspective, we tried this for over 20 years. Not only Medtronic, Boston, and Abbott. Every time when we give these tools, patients want these in the beginning, but within a few minutes or few days, they ask us to turn it
Yeah,
off because it's too much interference in their
yeah,
life. Um, and some patients might use it several hundred times a day, and some other patients would use it
yeah.
none.
Never even
So
look
we
at
got
it.
this, yeah, yeah, we got this tremendous false positives on both sides, and patients just get more anxious and more frustrated with it. So we don't do that. And in terms of physicians, they're not going to get notified either. So imagine being notified every 5 minutes all night long on something chronic. So the nurses will access this data, and the simplified version of that will be shown to them, and then they'll make a decision based on that information. If they want to dig deeper, they can absolutely do that. But the physicians do not want 5, 10 page report on something trending cardiac performance. They want a simple, green, yellow, red light type of
Yep.
approach. So we're gonna do that way.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. Wait, and you touched on something that was interesting. With regards to you're not managing acute you're not managing acute situations. What you're trying to do is, and not necessarily even prevent negative events.
Steer them away.
It's to be able to identify them early on, so that you can address it early on, so that they don't become big events. and
Right,
and that
absolutely. And
that I mean
also,
that goes along with everything that is important to the system today, right? Which is early identification, lower readmissions, prevention, et cetera. Those, I call them the Obamacare technologies. The technologies that are incented by Obamacare, basically.
and absolutely, and not only that, for heart failure patients, it's not that they decompensate and they recover 100%. When they decompensate, they recover up to 80%, and then they decompensate again. So it's a downward trend for them.
Right,
So every true emergency events is gonna hurt them severely,
right.
severely. So even if they get treated and recover and go home, they're not back to where they are. So that's one problem. And the second problem is heart failure patients are sick already. So imagine you're constantly tired, constantly, not well, unwell. And how do you know how unwell you are, how sick you
Right.
are? Are you sick enough to stay at home? Well enough to stay home, or are you sick enough to go to the ER? So this is a constant battle for patients. So imagine the anxiety of waking up in the morning and like, ooh, I feel a little worse than yesterday. What do I do?
Right. Yeah. Was it because
Do I call
I
the doctor?
had too much salt in my diet, drank too much alcohol?
Well, not even that. Just wake up one morning and say, I feel worse than
Yeah.
yesterday. What do I do? Do I go to the ER again, or do I wait it out? And if I do, what's the consequence of
Yeah.
that? So this is a tremendous anxiety for the patients, and it's equally troublesome for the physicians. So if I call you and say, hey, Dr. Moore, I don't feel good today. What do I do? I wish I could bring you in, but my clinic is completely full. Go to the ER and we'll sort it out
Yeah.
tonight. That's the kind of problem that the physicians are faced with. But having a trending data, you can say, well, you know, I'll see you on Monday,
Yeah.
or I'll see you on
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Or if it's,
Change your medication.
or
Yeah.
go to the ER.
Or go to the ER
Yeah.
right now. Yeah, go to the ER if it's appropriate. If not, I'll see you on Monday and you'll be
Yeah.
fine. So those are kind of decisions that the clinicians cannot make right now. So they're just blindly sending their patients to the ER just because they don't have that
Yeah.
data.
Yeah. That's really the crux of it, right? Is more data by which to make decisions.
Yeah, and without burning them either. The predicate devices will give you like 20, 30-page report, and you're like, gosh, it takes 20 minutes just to digest this information and process it. So the idea of time saving is just already out the
Yeah.
door. And still, after all that, it's still gonna be like, go to the ER and we'll figure it
Right.
out.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. And, one of the things that we had talked about that I think is really unique is, you're obviously going through a capital raise right now. You've made use of a really, kind of a forward-looking channel within that segment and have chosen to put this up on crowdfunding. To tell us a little bit about how that's going and what your experience has been.
Sure. So, yeah, I didn't know about crowdfunding. So, working for startup companies for the past 15 years, my world always been venture capital funding, and that was the way. That was the way. And early on, I decided to work with the angel investors first and get the funding there. So I was very lucky and very successful. I was on my way to raise about $5 million just from angel investors. And during that time, I said, well, why don't I try equity crowdfunding? It'd be nice to have additional two to maybe $500,000 in that. And I raised almost $9 million
Did you
on
really?
equity crowdfunding. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
still going strong. Yeah, no marketing, no fancy websites, nothing. It's just me having a conversation with a patient approach, and that was it.
And
And that's what I
and
did.
so what spread the word? Was it just people going to
Nothing.
that site and saying this looks interesting? I'm gonna take a look at it and put money into it.
Yep, yep. I also have over 100 physicians and colleagues invested in also. And that was another thing. I had all this, small checks to pretty sizable checks. So, but I couldn't handle all those
Right.
paperwork by myself. So I said, well, just put it in the crowdfunding, and then, they'll manage
Right.
it. So and that's how it kind of started, and it snowballed. And yeah, it's all walks of life. People who invest in me with their hard-earned, blood, sweat, and
Yeah.
tears. So
And we talked at TCT, and I know you've had a number of conversations with some of the bigger strategics now that you're starting to get attention from as you're getting closer to first in man and regulatory approval and commercialization and whatnot. So I don't know that crowdfunding is the answer for everybody, but I do think it's gotten a bad name. In our space specifically, right? And
right.
it's I think you're a great example of how that can be utilized as a tool, maybe not the only tool, but a tool to execute your vision. So,
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's a very valid point. What worked for me was that I was going to raise this money without crowdfunding.
hmm
I was going to raise $11 million without it. So I was almost at four, I believe, at that time. So, and I didn't use crowdfunding as a rescue vehicle. I used it as a launching platform.
Right.
Whereas a lot of these guys are unable to raise money, unable from a institution and or angel investors, and they're using this as a rescue. And by then, it's if you can't raise, unfortunately, in this business, if you can't raise money, then you can't survive. So I think a lot of the guys are resorting to that, trying to raise a couple $100,000 on equity crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Whereas in my case, it was a purely a launching base, and I owe everything to these guys that helped me to get to this point.
Oh, that's incredible, man. Well, I want to be sensitive to your time and get you out of here, but I really appreciate you coming on the show. This is fun for me, having seen the development of your career, and now you stepping into this role and having such massive success. Not surprised in the slightest, but it's
Yeah, thank
certainly
you.
neat to see that you've taken it this far, and I know you'll take it across the finish line. So congratulations, and look forward to working with you moving forward. And one of these days we'll get you back on the show for a recap when there's an exit. How about that?
I like that, and thank you so much for all the kind support you guys given me for the past several years, and your friendship. And yeah, so I wanted to build something that's simple and direct. Why complicate it and put patients and physicians through unnecessary hurdles? So high tech, absolutely high tech. Very few companies can do sensing and detection capabilities. So we have that, and we're optimizing the battery, and definitely will bring value to patients and clinicians and investors too. This is not a one of those feel good device. This will bring value to everybody that uses it.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And it's, like I said, it's funny because Bill Hunter said this in a talk he did at a Starfish event last week, and it's true. It's even people like to say it's not about the money, but even when they say it's not about the money, it's about the money, right? Because if the money in our system doesn't work, then these technologies can't come to market and help patients. So it's got to be
Right.
about the money. But I know you well enough to know that your heart's in the right place, and ultimately the
Thank you.
focus is on making patients live longer, but also live better while they're living longer, right? That's the key.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
Absolutely. And working with heart failure patients for the past 20 years, I can see that. Of course, sometimes I look at a patient and says, gosh, does this guy really need this device? Are we causing him more harm than doing? And patients will say things like, I just want to I just want 6 more months. I want just one more year so I can see my daughter wedding, or I want to see my grandchild being born. And those are the kind of things that bring value to
Yeah.
them. And of course, there are cases where, if a patient changed their lifestyle a little bit, it might not need this type of devices. But overall, overwhelming majority of the patients are are benefiting from our technology in general and the innovations in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. Well, thanks again. That's it for this edition of the Bleeding Edge of Digital Health. We'll catch you guys on the next show.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, guys.